Welcome to Recruiting.work, a place to connect, communicate, and collaborate on all things recruitment. This session is brought to you by OutMatch. Just as Recruiting.work brings people in the talent community together, OutMatch brings recruitment technologies together, combining assessments, video interviewing, and reference checking software. They're creating a more holistic, more human hiring experience. Learn more at OutMatch.com. All right, let's jump right into it. Thank you, everybody, for attending another episode of Recruiting.work, where peer practitioners from across the country get together and talk about various topics, all related to our industry. Today, our story is, or not our stories, our topic is recruiting success stories. Now, I'll be real blunt with you. I thought it was going to be easy to get people to come on to talk about recruiting success stories or to give examples of it. It's not so easy, as it turns out. Maybe that's just people want to see what people are talking about. I'll keep trying it. But I was a little bit shocked that there weren't a whole bunch of stories to tell in regards to success stories. But it is something I think we want to hear about it from other companies that are doing things in a good way, what works, what didn't work, or what have you, so we can continue to move our profession forward. With us today to talk about their success stories are DJ Khabeen. DJ, did I get that right? Yeah, okay, all right, sorry about that.
Khabeen.
I got it right last.
Khabeen. That's okay.
All right, out of Los Angeles, where I am also out of. Pam Koenig out of New York City. Barbara Marks out of Atlanta. Sarah Fatima. And Sarah, did I get your last name right? I think that's the first time I've pronounced it live.
Yes, you did.
Got it. Perfect. And then Travis Butler out of Indianapolis. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get on later. I was mentioning to the panelists earlier, it's kind of fickle this week with all the craziness with weather and everything going on in the country as far as people having power to actually get online. All right. So again, our topic for today, recruiting success stories. Before I have you, DJ, start the conversation, I do want to I'm going to stop sharing here. One housekeeping item, and that is in regards to the chat area. I encourage any and all attendees in the audience to put their questions or comments or anything that they have to say in the chat area. But before you do that, if you go down in the chat area at the bottom, there's a pick list menu it says all panelists. I need everybody to change that to say all panelists and attendees. So that way the conversation is going with the whole group and the panelists and myself are not hoarding the conversation. So please change that to say all panelists and attendees. And with that said, DJ, let's have you kick off the conversation if you can.
Sure thing. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you may be. Thanks for joining. My name is DJ Khabeen. I am a senior recruiter with Amazon, and I fully support our public relations org. So I only do hiring for PR for the Americas. My team has roughly 5 individuals with our manager. We have another individual who only recruits for public policy, and then 2 of my counterparts who help with PR and a couple of other areas. So I think our biggest success story that I'd love to talk about just as a team is how we got hit with a lot of interesting challenges last year because of COVID. Our group called Global Corporate Affairs, which is public policy and public relations, had maybe 80 people in it about 6 years ago, when our SVP, Jay Carney, came in and started building out the org. At this point, we are a little over 800 strong in public relations globally. And my team alone last year was able to bring in about 250 hires just between the 4 of us. So these are not high volume roles, unfortunately. I wish I could say they were, but they are very specific to certain functions, certain areas. The way our public relations org is structured is that we have a large centralized team, but the team is broken down into smaller groups that are fully dedicated or supportive of specific lines of business that we have, like AWS or devices or studios, et cetera, right? So again, between us, we were somehow able, during COVID and everything else, to hire around 250 individuals into public relations and public policy in the Americas. On top of that, we had a very lofty goal of doubling our diversity headcount within this org as well. By Q3 of 2021. And I'm really happy to say that my team has already exceeded that goal as of Q1 2021. So we're well ahead of our diversity hiring metrics as well that we are looking to achieve. So very grateful that we have a fantastic team that can achieve some awesome results like that. It was absolutely challenging. Lots of things to and hurdles really to get over. Lots of other issues around things like location and starting remotely and figuring out timelines for relocation based on when we are going to be back in office, which is all obviously TBD. Getting laptops to people, uh, getting them special login keys and things of that nature. It really was a huge feat. And my team, out of all of our general and administrative groups, is the only one that was actually able to not only meet but exceed our goals. And that would be finance, legal, et cetera, HR, all of the other G&A functions. So,
DJ, do you think there's a reason that stands out to you why you're able to hit the goals while others weren't?
yeah, I do. Yes, I think that the recruiters on our team are very seasoned. B, we are not just paper pushers. I think we actually recruit and we actually go find people. But we also have a nice luxury of getting a lot of applicants as well. That gives us the opportunity to really do volume at the same time. We have a very complex system at Amazon. We have between what our recruiters have to work through. I mean, we have multiple systems that we have to manage. And I think a lot of it too really comes down to how best to streamline and use those systems effectively to, move things along and keep things going, right? So our team has also been working together for a few years, for a couple of years really. So we do have a good sync, we have a good vibe with each other, and I think that helps a lot as well. We have a lot of fun in what we do. I think another really important key factor that my team is doing is we have a weekly candidate sync meeting. So between myself and my two other counterparts who recruit for public relations here, we have a weekly meeting where we discuss who our candidates are and where there might be overlap to other jobs within the function with the teams that they may be supporting. And I feel like that weekly sync to be able to find other opportunities that may not just be on my plate, but to share and to obviously find that best fit for a candidate has also been extremely helpful in us being able to do the volume that we were able to do.
DJ, how are you literally sharing your candidates? Is it just in conversation in those syncs, or is it?
Yeah. So we set an hour every Tuesday morning, and we literally just go through and talk about profiles, talk about candidates we've spoken to in the past week. All of us are pretty well aware of the other roles that we're recruiting on, but we have the ability to, obviously screen share and share our notes from conversations that we've had and just really get into those insights. So, yeah.
And I don't want to hoard any questions. So if anybody in the panelists has some questions, feel free to jump in. But I got another one for you.
Sure.
Given that you're kind of focused on the PR persona, I don't know if you know that or not. Are you working off an evergreen rec, or are you working off individual recs where you're trying to fill each one?
You know what? I wish it was an evergreen rec, but no. Like I said, every role is basically its own unique job. Right now, our PR org is really catching up. I mean, to date, we have almost 900,000 employees, and so our PR org only has around 800. So really, they are catching up to what the lines of business need in terms of support from that function. So at this point in time, we don't have the luxury of just having a blanket profile that we can chase after or an evergreen role or rec where we can just continue to hire on. There's also some other challenges that come into play just because of regulatory compliance, since we are a government vendor at this point, federal government vendor. So we have compliance, a lot of compliance and regulation that we have to adhere to that wouldn't really necessarily, I mean, it could, but it's just not a pathway we take. We do use pooling recs. We take advantage of those pretty frequently and often just to make sure we are opening our recs into other cities. Unfortunately, our system only limits our ability to open our recs in one location per rec, but we use pooling recs as a way to, get around that sometimes.
So another question for you around the sharing. So in the past, like at a biotech company I worked at, large sourcing team, the largest sourcing team I've ever worked with. But being in biotech, to your point, you could overlap in certain areas. So we actually made it in the system type of transition where, hey, this person might be right for another person's rec or another person's rec.
Mhm.
I think we labeled it a shared opportunity or something like that. And we would actually kind of give credit every time you put forth another candidate for somebody else's rec. So it was kind of in your meeting version, it was kind of like in the system version. And then they would kind of get spotlighted in that based upon the source of that applicant or rec. The other recruiter or sourcer would know, hey, this person came recommended from another person on our team. So it didn't account for like a large percentage of hires, but it accounted for a good, meaningful number. And it's just good team sharing.
Yeah.
How was that team sharing aspect come into play with?
Done and managed.
Yeah.
We have an internal doc sharing system that we use ultimately, where we've created basically a document or a table really, where we'll pop in the candidate's name, obviously their profile link into our system. If we have a LinkedIn profile or something like that, we'll pop that in there as well. And then we just basically project manage as we go through, but everybody has the visibility to go in and see those other candidates and see exactly where they sit. I think a couple of other things that we're doing that are also really important to note as well is we have a very good recycle program, is what we would call it, where we also take candidates who may have gone through process on one opportunity or one rec. Maybe they got to an on-site, but they weren't interested in moving forward for that role, but they're still interested in having them get hired for Amazon. So we actually send out a weekly recycle list as well of candidates to all of our hiring managers that have open recs in case they want to pick up someone that may have been in process that we just maybe skipped over or didn't see. So that's another thing that we're doing very regularly. Lastly, and I'm totally blanking on what my last piece was, referrals. So our hiring managers, we really encourage them, and we actually do LinkedIn trainings with them to go in and actually do Boolean searches and find their own referrals and find their own people and bring them in. Just on the general LinkedIn, we teach them how to use that, and we also just really hit hard home with them that it is really important to bring in referrals, and we actually end up hiring a ton of referrals too. So all of those things combined, I think, really helped us achieve what we got to last year.
I kind of put you on the spot. Do you know what your employee referral rate is for hires within your team?
No clue. It's so high. It's so high. I wouldn't even be able to tell you.
Is it over 60? Close?
I can't even ballpark it at this point. Yeah, it might be half. It might be 50%, close to that.
Do you think that a high employee referral rate has an effect on your diversity hiring?
Yes, absolutely, and that's something that we also have really tried to talk with our teams and hiring managers about, is because we've also said, you may not know this person personally, but if you've heard from other people that, hey, they're really good at what they do, but you don't know them personally, please still send their resume along to us, send their profile along to us. That way we can at least check it out. You don't necessarily have to back them and give them your, full vouch for what they do, but just continue to bring in candidates. And yes, we've very much tried to make that diversity piece a big portion of that as well. But we're also a bit limited too. I mean, the diversity within the public relations function in the United States is very low. I would say maybe 8.5% of practitioners in public relations are of a diverse background, whereas the rest are Caucasian and white. So we are already at a
bit of a
challenge. Yeah. Yeah, it's already challenging. So
DJ, can I just jump in here and ask you a quick question?
Sure. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that there was an intentional focus on wanting to bring in diverse talent by Q3 of this year, and we've already surpassed that. So with that intentional focus, was there particular channels that you decided to focus on or source from? How did you create the interest in the pipeline in diversity?
Yeah. So something we started doing actually just last year is we not only have that team sharing meeting where we talk about candidates, but we also have a meeting every week that's standing where we actually just get together on a call and we just source diverse candidates. So we get to just, talk crap with each other, have fun with each other, just enjoy some good bonding time as a team. But we also just source diverse candidates during that hour on a weekly basis. This year, we actually started for Q1, we actually started just only externally sourcing diverse talent to put into the pipeline before we actually started bringing in other talent. So we wanted to make sure that we were heading that on first and foremost before we opened it up to other forms of sourcing. Obviously, we're getting candidates into the pipeline because of applicants and referrals, but our external sourcing efforts, we were spending all of Q1 just on diversity sourcing.
That's a good segue, I guess, into another question that I have. I mean, obviously,
Sure.
being a part of Amazon, you have the luxury of a lot of applicants to start off with, right? You've got a big plethora of that, which is great, by the way. And you've got the brand recognition.
Sometimes, I will say it, sometimes it's good. Sometimes we get, I mean, in PR, for some reason, lots of people think they can do PR, and school teachers and professors and post office workers and, you know, those kinds of applicants still come in that we have to weed through. So yes, we have the luxury of a high volume of applications, but that also creates a lot of churn and extra work that you have to be very strategic about how you source within our applicant system to find the candidates that you actually want on those recs, because we may have 1,500 or 2,000 candidates that have applied. So
that's true. So when you say diverse talent, then, and not to put you on the spot entirely, but just a question, right? I mean, this is a focus for my org this year.
Sure.
So when you say diverse talent, is that to people? How are you segmenting those? Right? Is diverse talent like true D&I? Are you looking at, do veterans fall into that? Do people with disabilities fall into that? Like, what does diversity mean at Amazon?
It can mean a whole lot of things. And I think it really is going to depend on the org and what their ultimate goals are. So, you know, you may have within engineering, diversity is women, you know, and there's an emphasis on hiring female talent. For PR, we actually have to go a little bit of the opposite direction and be intentional about hiring males into the org, because PR is predominantly a female dominated function. Obviously, there are certain ethnicities that we, you know, are looking to bring into the fold. I don't think I can go into those details and specifics, unfortunately, but you know, we do look at different areas, including veterans. Veterans is a you know, we have our own recruiting team in here at Amazon that just focuses on veterans and finding homes for them across all of Amazon. So we do have a good machine behind us that really helps, but obviously it still takes a very concerted effort. So.
Yeah, I asked about the ERP, the Employee Referral Program. I'm a big believer in it. I know a lot of people could get concerned by it because, Barbara, I think to your question, does it affect diversity or anything like that? If you can use it to affect in a positive way, great. But very few companies have like a dedicated. I don't think I've seen one. I was at one place where we almost had somebody get to do it, but it kind of got killed because they saw how much actual work recruiting is. But have somebody dedicated to own the ERP program in it. I think with DE&I teams starting to build out, hopefully they'll jump in and take that opportunity. Just a wishful list of mine. I think there's a lot of opportunity around it to build that out. And I was asking about percentages because I've seen it be 10%, 30%. I've never seen it over 50% myself, but I'm always interested in those numbers. All right. Thank you, DJ. Pam, we're going to jump over to you.
Okay, great. So I'm a recruiter at Creative Circle. So I work on the agency side. So I work on a lot of different types of roles across digital marketing and creative and advertising. So one of my success stories, I mean, my whole thing is, which I've spoken about before on these webinars, is really thinking outside of the box. And when it comes to, you know, submitting candidates to our jobs. So I was working with a very well-known food brand several years ago, and they came to us looking for an art director, and they did not have a creative director in place. So I remember trying to say to them, you know, maybe you should get a creative director first, because who's the art director going to report into? But they didn't want to do that. You know, I was working with human resources. So the first candidate I submitted was someone who I've known for a long time, who came from Nike, Sesame Street, and Elektra Records. So all three different industries, but all very well-known brands. And clearly the fact that she could transition from one to another just shows how strong she is. So I submit her, and immediately I get told no food and beverage, like an absolute no. And I was like, please consider her. Look at the brand she's worked on. And I mean, this brand is also very big, the one that I was sourcing for. No, no, no. They kept saying no. So I knew that she was right for the job. So I submitted people that had food. No, we don't like their personality. No, no. And I kept referring back to this woman over and over and over. 6 months later, they finally decide they're going to interview her. They fell in love with her. And it's been over 10 years now that she's been there, and they gave her the creative director title. So, my whole point with that, and I love that because she also turned into a client. So, but I love that story because, I stuck with my gut. I just knew that they needed her. They just didn't know it, at the beginning. But I mean, she's produced commercials now that I'm sure we've all seen on TV. But like I said, going on 10 years with this company, because I just, I didn't give up. So that was, one of my success stories that I get excited about. And then, another one was a recruiter that I work with at Creative Circle had been working on a job for a designer with a law firm in New York City. And she was told that they had to have legal experience. So it was a little difficult, for her. She wasn't finding anyone. So finally they asked if I wanted to try it. And I said yes. So I submit 1 or 2 people that kind of had legal experience. They had touched on it. But then I decided to call the client and introduce myself. And while I had her on the phone, she said, oh, just so you know, we're interviewing a few other people on our own. And I said, oh, and they all have legal? And she goes, oh, no, legal is not a requirement anymore. So as soon as I had asked that question and found out legal was not a requirement anymore, I was able to not only fill that role, but fill 4 other roles with that one law firm within like 6 months. Because, without asking questions, I would have been sourcing people that had legal experience. So it's really important to stay in touch with the client because along the way, things may change on their end and they just may not reach out and tell you, but it can make all the difference, when you're looking for candidates.
So Pam, a question for you, and I kind of put that in the championing the candidate, right? You got to push them through to get them to that next step and let them prove themselves. A while back, and it's probably too late for you, not that you would do it or anything like that. I had a fellow recruiter that had to champion a candidate in that the manager didn't want. They ended up finally bringing him, hired them, and then I can't remember what he sent, but it was on the anniversary. It was a coffee cup with a picture of either him or the candidate. I can't remember, but on the anniversary of that person that they hired, it was to celebrate that person's anniversary because they were there for a year. Kind of a friendly reminder that, remember, you didn't want to hire this person. And I forced them in there. They ended up hire. It's kind of a friendly nudge around that championing the candidate. But let me ask you a question, because you referenced HR in there, right? Trying to be from the TA side of things to be, hey, let us do our job. Let us be the recruiting, interview the people that we're recommending because we're recommending for a reason. Kind of getting that sync with HR, or just the business units if there's no intersection with HR. Any thoughts around a good winning strategy in partnering with HR or a BU specifically to get that trust on an ongoing manner? It sounds like you earned that trust and it will continue for you, but getting that trust, and is it case by case with each hiring manager? That's kind of what I've found to be the case. What are the thoughts? And I won't put you totally on the spot, Pam, tell panelists too, but getting a good relationship with the BU or HR.
I mean, I think first of all, it's, personality and trying not to, feeling them out and learning kind of what their process is in terms of recruiting. But, also not being overly pushy with HR until you know that they trust you. If you have a strong candidate, maybe, I always like to follow up with a phone call and explain why that candidate, is strong. I mean, we do have issues sometimes with HR. They're very methodical. And if they don't see the matching title on a resume that matches their open position, they may automatically reject the candidate. They're not always trained. They're not always specialized to know what a hiring manager is looking for. So we do try to go directly to a hiring manager when we can. But in terms of human resources, just letting them know this is why the candidate would be really good. And like I said, going through the history, she worked at this brand, this brand, this brand, and just to keep pushing. But if ultimately they say we want to see people with food, you got to give them the resumes of people with food. But that doesn't mean you're letting go of the one that you feel strongly about.
Got it. How about to the other panelists? Any winning strategies on building that bond with the other departments?
I mean, I think that you have to start out with the idea that we are partners and we work together. I think years ago, there was a lot more friction between HR and recruiting. And it's because we're very different personalities. You know, recruiting is let's do it now. Let's get this hire. Let's move forward. Blah, blah, blah. And then HR is like, whoa, let's slow down because they want to make sure that we don't get sued into oblivion or there are compliance issues. And so, you know, they're looking long term, and sometimes we're looking at the next hire. And so, you know, we have different viewpoints, and I think realizing that and realizing that there are good points about both of those approaches, and then just really approaching it as a partnership. You know, I work on the corporate side, and so I tend to work with HR a lot. And I think building those bridges along the way, because a lot of times recruiters, especially the field recruiters, are going to hear things long before the HR team will, because they're working directly with those hiring managers. You know, they can say, hey, you know, this person seems a little stressed. You may want to reach out. Or, hey, this manager just asked me to post a job and the person's still in the role. You know, so and we're like, no, we're not doing that, by the way. Right. But you know, and then saying, hey, I'm bringing HR in because again, that's what we should be doing. And so I think just having that spirit of partnership and stating that from the beginning and then following that, I think that goes a long way. So.
And I mean, I think it's, you know, important for the hiring managers within an organization to also, you know, like Barbara said, have that relationship with human resources so that when they have an urgent need, they can emphasize that to human resources, because human resources may not think it's urgent. But if it is urgent, I, as a recruiter, you know, can become so pushy with HR, but meanwhile, it really should be the hiring manager that becomes pushy with HR to get somebody in the seat. Not only that, sometimes hiring managers reach out to us with positions that have not been approved yet. And that's when we need to partner with HR to make sure that we're not spinning our wheels, you know, giving candidates hope that there's a job that they might be interested in if the job has not even been approved yet.
I think I want to bounce off of what Barbara and Pam said. I mean, with the TA org, we work at a different pace than the rest of the organization in many ways, right? HR, yes, is all about let's not get sued, let's not get legal involved. That's kind of where they're coming from at all times. Within the organization, with every organization I've worked in, it's always been, we're part of one team. HR does include TA. So we are not stepchildren, right? And for lack of a better word. So there will be what TA is the face of the organization. We are the front. We personify whatever organization we're in. So there's going to be a fairly good chance, because of the interaction that we have with hiring managers on a more consistent basis, we're going to hear a lot more stuff down the grapevine before the HR business partners and the HR managers hear this stuff. At that point, it's really more around that strategic partnership. The way we have here resource councils, right? Here at Verifone, we've established something called resource councils. And that is where we have the HR business partners, stakeholders. It goes we have the EVP involved, right? I've got the global EVP involved with engineering. It's like, hey, we're hiring 2,400 engineers at this point, just in his org. And we're right there. There's many times where I will tell them, hey, you're about to lose this person, this person, and this person. And the HR partner isn't even aware. It's because we have the relationship. The core of being in TA is relationship management. And that should extend to human resources as well. It's not just about the spreadsheets. It's not just about the legal implications. It is the fact that we are in the business of people. And these are live human beings. So let's treat them that way, right? So whether it's a candidate, whether it's an internal stakeholder, whether it's HR, it's all the same. We are in the business of people. So how do we make this a signature experience? So that's a conversation always across the board, that where we've helped become that partner both to HR and to the business at the same time, right? So
I would add to that, if one simple step that everybody can do in building that relationship, whether it's HR or the business unit, is ask somebody out for coffee or lunch and do your best not to talk about your recs, right? It's just there to talk.
oh my God, yeah.
And if they're too busy, which most likely they are, you're out there offering. So if they say no, you still offered, which is gives you back your time. But that is one simple thing I would recommend if you have the time, is to connect, to your point, Sarah, that relationship piece. You want to go out for a coffee? Promise I won't talk about Rex or something to that effect. It does wonders, even if they say no.
It absolutely does. And it's also the clear understanding that, you know, again, because we're in the business of people, for the lack of a better word, it is understanding their need. No hiring manager, nobody comes to you because they're just exploring, right? They're coming to you because there's a genuine business need. As TA professionals, it is our responsibility to be cognizant of that need and to meet it with the same sense of urgency. So to Pam's point, managers may come and say, hey, I have a rec coming down. It's not because they're trying to circumvent anybody. It is because this may be a true business impact. So how, HR, do we support this person instead of creating more impediments and more issues for them? How do we make this seamless? There are a lot of other things that they do in their day-to-day job besides recruiting. Recruiting needs to be a well-oiled engine, no matter what we're hiring for. So how do we support our business? That is a common stakeholder for you and me, HR. How do we support them in making this easy? And that's where you start the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Pam. DJ, I don't know if you had to jump. We're hitting that half-hour mark. Just FYI. Yeah, gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Barbara, let's jump over to yours. Thanks, DJ.
Sure. So I think our success story last year, and it was kind of interesting that we actually had a success story in 2020 because I think a lot of times we were focused on surviving as opposed to thriving. But when I joined my current company, and we've actually been very, very busy. We've been very lucky in the economic climate. I work with a janitorial services company, so we've had a lot of extra work to do. And one of the things that we had done, that we started actually in 2019, toward the end of 2019, is our group transitioned from having a lot of administrative function, having people who worked in the administrative function who were doing the recruiting before I joined the company, and we moved to having full-time professional recruiters, and making that shift from hiring managers who expected order takers or who expected more of an administrative function, and making the shift over the course of 2020 to really partners with the business. And we did it in a year that we thought was going to take a lot longer. But I think actually everything with the pandemic helped us to move toward that partnership status actually a lot more quickly. Because when the pandemic hit in really end of February, beginning of March, a lot of companies started contracting, but because we're in janitorial services, our business kind of exploded, right? And so our field management staff suddenly was looking at, almost double the work that they had. And so we said, hey, we will help you with this, we will help you with that. And we really provided vital support to them to help them fulfill their not just their regular contractual agreements that we had in place, but the additional work around COVID cleans and around extra disinfections and really sanitations that they had to do. And so when their workload doubled, we also moved to working from home instead of in our office, and that allowed people to be a lot more flexible with their time. And the folks, we're all based here in Atlanta in Eastern Standard Time, so folks in the other half of the country, which is 2 and 3 hours behind us, they really appreciated the fact that we were able to match their business hours a lot more closely. And so I think because they saw that we were in the business of supporting them, that they they move pretty quickly to see us as business partners. And we started getting a lot more questions also from some of our hiring managers, which were a little bit more HR skewed, which I love, because again, the recruiter is going to hear things a lot more quickly, I think, than HR, because you're in the trenches with them. And so they were able to reach out to to our HR managers and say, hey, you need to reach out to so-and-so about this, or this manager seems a little shaky on how to do this, or they need some help with corrective action. Can you reach out and walk them through this whole process, again. And then as we were hiring new managers, new field managers, we were able to kind of start them off with training and with this idea that we were business partners. We had, prior to probably mid-year, the field managers were doing their own training on our applicant tracking system. And so we moved that in-house, where our recruiters, for every new area manager, spends about an hour and a half in that second week, training them on not just the use, their piece of it, of the applicant tracking system, but really these are the SLAs. Like this, I'm going to send you candidates, and because we do hourly hiring, it's a very quick turnaround time. And so we say, if you don't reach out to the candidate within really 4 to 8 hours, that candidate's probably gone. So when I was doing software hiring, I'm like, you have 3 days to respond. I really prefer 1, but I can live with 3. Now we're talking hours. And actually the talent pool for hourly recruiting, I mean, it's pretty brutal right now. And there's a lot of competition for hourly employees. And so we have to move quickly, and starting off with an idea of, these are the things we expect from you as a hiring manager. These are the things you can expect from us as recruiters, as professional recruiters. I think, it took about a year, which seems like a long time, but it only took a year, which for a culture shift is, I think, a pretty short span of time. So that's our success story this year. And I was, I will say toward October, we're wondering, are we going to turn this corner? And then suddenly something happened in November. And I think we all kind of said, okay, look, we're all in this together, and we're here to support you. And I think we've shown over the last few months that we are really here to support you, hiring manager. And they really started getting on the bandwagon. And then we had a new release, a kind of a new look and feel of our ATS. We did training for that at the beginning of December, and everybody really jumped on the bandwagon. They didn't argue the point, oh, I don't want to have any training. They're like, yeah, sure, we get it. This is what we do now. And I'm like, that's right. This is what we do now. So I think just turning from that order taker viewpoint to partners with the business, we're really actually really pleased with it. So that's our success story.
I love to hear stories about synergy with different groups and companies. I really think it is part of that. And in the past, I do think there's a separation between groups. I think we're moving away from that. And kind of the first and foremost, and I'll be the first to admit, I'm rubbing HR people the wrong way, or they're rubbing me the wrong way. It hasn't always been in sync, but it's starting to change. So hearing stories of syncing all of HR with the BU is great. There's a lot of, and this is me just sort of pulling anecdotal stories, with DE&I becoming so prevalent in 2020, and even starting before that, but just really hitting the mainstream media in 2020, is seeing that synergy with recruiting and DE&I. And then I'm kind of thinking, as we move forward, if we continue to do, the L&D teams is going to be another team to bring in and get in sync. Because now that we've hired certain groups of talent, let's upskill. So we're not recruiting diverse talent from one company to bring into ours, but we're all just sort of upskilling everybody along with the whole diversity program. And Sarah, to your point earlier, sorry, Bar, Sarah, to your point earlier about we're the face, I totally agree with that. Out there, whether it's the face on Zoom or on the phone, it's certainly face to help. Sorry, Barbara, go ahead.
So, but I think L&D can be a very powerful part of inclusion.
Yep.
I think, I think inclusion is maybe sometimes the forgotten part of diversity. You can bring people into your organization, but if they don't feel valued and included, then they're going to leave for a place where they will feel valued and included. And I think learning and development can be a part of that, because if you are spending, we tell this to our field management all the time. If you put the time in early in that, those first few days to train people right, and to show them exactly what they need to do and make sure they understand how to get their supplies, they're going to stay with us longer term than they would if you didn't. Partly because you're showing them I'm willing to invest time in you, which for most of us is the only resource that we all most value, right? Yes, I'm going to put some money in it. I'm going to put some company money in that, but I'm going to invest my time, and I can't get that back. We've all been on that call with someone. You're like, oh my God, that's an hour of my life I'm never going to get back, right? But when a company is saying, I'm going to invest a day of training, I'm going to invest long term over this next 6 months, you're going to have 3 opportunities for learning, those kinds of things, people do feel more included. So I think L&D can be a big part of that. So
I agree. I think a strong L&D program at a company gives options to the recruiting team if they don't have every single skill set. Well, we got a training program. That's how we get in there. All right. Thank you, Barbara. Sarah, last but not least, sorry, let's jump over to you.
Sure. Okay, well, in our little world, so just to give you a heads up, to set the tone here. When I started with Verifone in May of 2019, we did not have a talent acquisition function here. It was completely outsourced. In our RPO, global, we're in 150 countries. We're operating in 150 countries, offices in about 57, and no TA function. The whole thing was outsourced. So they bring me on, and they're like, oh, we're thinking of bringing TA in-house. And I started end of July. They fired the RPO company a week later, globally. And they're like, great, we're going to bring this in. And so we started with a team of 1 right here, and then moved on to hiring leads in the different regions. So we broke it down with 3 different regions, and then ended up hiring our entire team. So I now have a team of 36 people and broken across all the different regions. And let me just put it this way. When in 2020, with COVID and with the world changing the way it did, and the face that it completely changed the way we do TA in a lot of respects, we still ended up hiring across the board. We brought in 2,200 new hires full-time, and these are all high-skilled engineering, product management, brought in a CFO, so executive search as well, function, and then we brought in about close to 2,800 contingent workers as well. And everything was done in-house. No agencies, no partners, just throughout in-house with the 36 people that we had. And it's a huge feat when you start thinking of the fact that we actually did not have a process in place. It was the RPO managed the whole thing. So when they decided to leave, they kind of took their book and walked away with what their process looks like. And I remember looking at that binder going, it was like this thick. It's like, there's no way. There's no way we're going to be able to sell this to the business and say, please follow step 1A of, this part. It wasn't. So it was like, let's throw the book out and let's start fresh. So everything from brand new processes, redesign TA, redesign Verifone's brand within the market, because it's not a well-known brand. Funny enough, we've been around for over 40 years. People in the fintech space know Verifone very well, but executive leadership has never been big on social branding, external eminence. It's always been referrals and word of mouth, and you kind of bring the people that you know, and that's great, right? We have close to a 40% referral rate success, by the way, in our program, which is great. But then we also need to go out and create an external brand presence. So literally starting from brand new, and hey, this is how you open a rec. We use Workday as our tool. This is how you open a requisition. This is what the process looks like, to going in and finding the right candidate and then onboarding that person. Onboarding across the board in the Americas would take 3 weeks from the moment a person was identified to when they started. Like, I remember within the first 3 weeks of me starting, 2 people showed up at the office, and they were new hires and nobody knew. And I was like, okay, because the manager had decided to go about this by himself and obviously had no clue, right? So he kind of put it somewhere in the system, and it got lost in translation, and said, hey guys, show up. And because he knew these people, they showed up. And so the receptionist calls, and she's like, do you know of these people? I'm like, no, I don't. But okay, after a very sad welcome, We brought them in, and I was like, we're never doing this again. So let's start fresh. So we, again, like I said, we threw whatever we knew out of the window, and we started fresh. Onboarding, for instance, with us, besides, recruiting was, yes, how do we leverage LinkedIn? How do we leverage our networks? How do we do the traditional one-on-one recruiting, right? Let's start with that. Bringing in strong people, really leveraging the referral network, really leveraging distinct sourcing channels. Instead of just going in blind, partnering with specific specialized groups for the kind of skill sets we were looking for, creating a brand within those, creating a recognition within those, to even onboarding, because that is a very important part of recruiting. You can find the greatest person, but if you do a crappy job in bringing them on board, guess what? They're not going to show, or they're not going to stay. They'll get moved away very quickly. So that white glove service, that hand holding them till they start at the company and they are able to log in and get their benefits done, get all that fun stuff done, and they have a proper path. They've met with their manager who may be sitting on the other side of the world, because we have managers that sit in New Zealand, for instance. So you're never going to ever meet somebody on, on a waking day. How do you ensure a proper experience? That experience becomes exceptionally important. So marking that and being able to take it from 3 weeks down to 2 days, whether we need to hire one person or I need to bring in 150, they will all get hired, onboarded with the appropriate provisions that they need, everything within 2 business days. So I think that's a huge success for us to be able to streamline what we had from where we were to where we are now, and say, no matter where you are in the world, not just the Americas, no matter where you are in the world, I can have somebody on in 2 days. So to me, that's a huge success story.
Absolutely. So Sarah, let me ask you a question kind of around change management.
Yeah.
You said you threw out the book, right? And just coming from a BSA background, you can either create new or fix broken.
Yeah.
If you had a choice, would you rather throw out the book and create new, or would you rather try and fix broken?
In the world that I came into, it was just better for me to start new, because there was no standardization. That was the important piece. It doesn't matter where the manager is, because we're a global company. And like I said, we've got managers. I have managers in New Zealand that have teams sitting in Romania and teams sitting in San Francisco. They're never going to meet each other when the sun is out. It's never going to happen, right? So therefore, it becomes very, very, very important that experience, whether the person is in San Francisco or the person is in Atlanta or they're sitting in Romania or New Zealand, is exactly the same. And the process, or the world I came into or inherited, there was none of that. There were no synergies, right? TA recruiting was really seen as it was really seen as a hurdle more than anything else. I remember getting on a call, the first call I got on, and people were like, you're the new person. That's how bad it was regarded. There was no regard for the function in itself and the fact that we were bringing in talent. And then, so it was easier for me to just throw it out. We're going to do this. We're going to humanize this effort. We're going to humanize the recruiting process. We're going to humanize and create signature experiences. That is the most important thing. So whether or not somebody hired or comes and works for us, every candidate we need to make sure every candidate has the same experience, whether or not they work for us. Every hiring manager, whether they end up hiring direct or not, needs to have the exact same experience. And it doesn't matter where in the world they're sitting. That is the most important thing. Process is a means to an end. Yes, it is important to simplify. It is important to optimize that. And that's a continuous effort. It is never done. The most important thing is how you make that person feel, because that impression is going to last throughout your entire engagement. That relationship building is what's going to get you through all of the process hurdles you may come through. So that's been our focus.
And you mentioned Workday. Did you use Workday HRS and Workday Recruit?
No. So Workday is very much our HRIS system, so back end. We used to have JobVite in here. And I don't know if anybody on the call has ever used JobVite, but
I have.
Okay. So this maybe that'll be a surprise, but we threw it out. We sent it. We said thank you, and we switched over. We switched over to Greenhouse from JobVite, and it's just been night and day for us. It's been night and day just to be able to have that real time collaboration. We collaborate with our hiring managers off of that. emails are, we don't spend a whole lot of time on emails. It's all through greenhouses, and everybody can see what's going on. It's completely transparent. It's great. EVPs go in there and be like, what's happening with my person or with my role? And we can just log him in and he can go in and see what's going on. Like, everybody has transparency, and that's not something we did with JobBite. So even that has been a really big improvement in our experience.
If it helps any, I couldn't get any hiring managers into JobBite either.
I was bored.
From recruiter side, it could get the job done, left things desired, but hiring managers, that wasn't happening. So let me ask you a question. Not like you had any time to do this. Kind of putting the question of, hey, if I'm not changing a large company from this to that, but if I was a company, say 200 employees, and we have forecasted to grow in the next year to 800 to 1,000. So, and I'm a big fan of the create new versus trying to change the existing. Did you by chance happen to create any type of playbook or guidebook around moving from A to B?
We did. So we did from the very beginning, like, let's start from the scratch. Hiring manager, how do you engage? How do you engage with your rep? Where does HR have a stake into this? Where does finance have a stake into this? Let me show you where you're spending a lot of your time. It did take some observation of how the processes work, but it was really simplifying it to that point. Hey, here's a template for you, hiring manager. Whenever you have a need, just plug in these needs in there, send it off, right? Send it off to your finance controller, send it off to your HR partner, get their buy-in so you're not running around in circles waiting for stuff, right? And normally that would have taken 10 business days in itself. That's what it used to take when I started, because managers wanted to open the recs. They would go in there and try to open the recs themselves, circumvent the process, get stopped, and it was just frustrating. So everything down to simplifying, writing those templates, saying this is what you need to be able to send it out, get the conversation started, to writing a playbook back to back. Recruiters, these are your steps, 1, 2, 3. So if I fall off the face of the earth tomorrow, anybody from any part of the world can jump in and just pick right back up, right? So we wrote it all. We burned the midnight oil on this one, but it was worth it, right? It was worth it because you create a standardization across the globe, right? And you create a certain expectation. Because of that, you create a certain expectation of what talent acquisition needs to be, what talent needs to be within the organization. And everybody is aware of that, right? And that playbook is available for HR. That playbook is available for the business stakeholders, whoever wants and has the time to read it. Here are what we are committing to. Here are our guiding principles. And here's the process. This is the construct of the process that we work in to optimize recruiting for you.
Got it.
So, simplify to that level.
Back in the day, we called them bus binders, because if you get hit by a bus, what do? Look in the binder. Now, the binders are digital now, but it goes along that way. One little personal success story around change management they're implementing. It's not quite a training manual or tutorial. I would always create a video-based Q&A. So if you had a question, there would be a less than 5-minute answer to it. If it was more than 5 minutes, it's too long. You got to tighten up your process. But people love to be able to learn off video and have it a Q&A type format. That worked great for me at multiple places to help people learn a new process or new system. So just food for thought.
Yeah, and actually it's great that you mentioned that, because it's one of the things that we're doing right now. We've just implemented, to Barbara's point, L&D function, right? So it's here. We've actually implemented an LMS, and all of our trainings that we have are being converted to digital 2.5-minute video, bite-sized consumable videos, and being put into a learning path. So if you're a new manager, hey, this is what you've got to do to be successful around recruiting for talent, right? If you are doing in HR and you need to put in a promotion, here's a 2-minute video to show you how to do that and what are the questions to ask. So again, consumable bite-sized pieces for all the stakeholders involved.
What tool are you using to make those tutorials, Sarah?
So our LMS is Docebo. We're using Microsoft Teams and right now to do our videos. And then we've actually I don't know how this is going to work, but we've actually just invested into Doodly to create storyboards and to see if, conceptually, if there's process that we want to talk about, how do we not have them go through a PowerPoint? How do we make it more interesting? So we're playing around. People on my team who are interested in this are playing around with Doodly to see if we could leverage different forms of learning to get get greater adoption.
Got it. Yeah, I've used a tool called Camtasia in the past. It's cheap, easy to use and produce. I think Teams is kind of destroying a lot of the smaller companies where you got to be involved in Teams now and Zoom and what have you. But I've always used Camtasia, pretty cheap
I
tool.
use that. We like that.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I still use it. Like
It's super simple, and so it's easier, I think, for a non-graphic user.
Yeah, but yeah, just any tool visually recording, short and to the point. I think that's the secret sauce in getting people to use tools and training. And
30 seconds, no more than that.
yeah,
It's just,
and
you're gonna lose people after that.
keep it contextual. Kind of, Sarah, to your point about getting the managers inside of what's your ATS Greenhouse?
Greenhouse. Yeah.
You're seeing it's all in there. To me, that's contextual, right? I'm in this app. It's all about our recruiting. I'm out of this app. I'm on to other stuff. So when you get contextual, I think that's the best way to get things done. Pam, thank you very much for that, Sarah. Pam or Barbara, any questions for Sarah? Okay. And I'm sorry, I didn't really follow along too much in the chat area. I was kind of into the conversation, so I missed some of the chat, but I will repost some of the chat and probably follow up with some questions. So Sarah, I couldn't catch the LMS. Did you use a?
It's Docebo.
How do you spell that?
I just put it in the chat, actually.
Oh, okay, all right. I've never heard of that one.
It's actually new, but again, cloud-based, very easily. It integrates very easily with Greenhouse, integrates very easily with Workday, something that people aren't hopping into disjointed systems. How do you make it one cohesive system? So Docebo, cloud-based, has been actually exceptional in how easy it is. So.
Okay, I will check it out. Great. Thank you very much for today's session. I thought it was really cool and really interesting. I love hearing good stories in our profession. So again, thank you very much. And with that said, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.